And we're live, sort of live. All right. So, welcome back to the Alpha Sworn podcast. And sitting with me today virtually is George Briones from Soflete. And I know we've talked before, man, and we actually had like what I consider to be a great conversation as far as like just our views on training methodologies, like breathing protocols, like all that kind of stuff. I just felt like we were such on the same page with it. It was so nice to almost get like validation for like, man, like I'm doing some stuff right, because like these guys in these camps, like I really respect what they do and they're saying the same things. So it was really, really cool. But anyway, like I'm just super stoked to have you back on and to connect with you again. So thank you.
No, yeah, dude, definitely. I appreciate you reaching back out, especially when I heard you starting the show. It was one of those things was like, cool, man, there's another guy out here in the fitness industry trying to put out great information for guys who need, and for ladies who need this content, right? Because at the end of the day, there's so many people right now in this fitness industry that are trying to do A, B, C, and D and have no experience behind what they're talking about. When I talk about experience, it's more of the idea of like actually being in the shit, creating that adversity of really living it, right? You know, from coming from the military aspect of being this combat athlete to you being an LEO and to just in general, like someone who wants to go do a CrossFit competition, to someone who's saying like you should hustle and live your life a certain way. It's like the validation actually really comes more from you actually really doing it, right? Like you're like, hey, I'm living this lifestyle. Like our last talk we had on, we did it for Instagram and Facebook on the same thing we did. We talked about sleep. We talked about like what kind of like sleeping patterns should we look at for an LEO, and realistically it comes down to I'm only able to talk about that because I've been in that situation of where I've had to do nighttime patrols in Afghanistan and Iraq, and then I've also had to do, you know, daytime and nighttime graded patrols as an instructor at the schoolhouse as a reconnaissance tactical instructor, and really have to find that happy medium of fueling myself and still being able to stay fit for my job and for my life. And it was really cool to kind of come on and talk about that with you and really see that, okay, cool, not just for you validation, but also that, hey, I get the validation as well. And realistically, dude, like we're all searching for validation somehow, way, shape, or form, right? And
yeah,
it's really cool to have that validation in our profession to be like, okay, we're making a difference. And yeah, it might not be on this big fucking spectrum, but it's on a spectrum that is actually helping people that are really close to me to keep them alive. And that's what matters.
100%, man. And that like what you said, it doesn't matter. Like the scale is always like, that's ego, you know, to me, like the scale of the scope of our reach. And I was just talking to this with a guy on my SWAT team about this last night. He's asking me about content and like, you know, providing, like, isn't that exhausting? And I'm like, yeah, it totally is. But at the same time, like if this can reach one cop or somebody, some tactical based athlete, and it's going to provide them an edge, you know, getting through their day and just being safer, then in the end, like scale is all about ego to an extent, you know what I mean? So it's doing its job, but yeah, so sweet, man. Before we get too deep into it, because I can see where the conversations are just going to spur already. Give me a little bit of background, like what's your story, like, you know, in a nutshell, and then we'll kind of go from there, you know, introduce yourself.
Yeah, definitely. Hey guys, what's up? Again, hello. Just right back into it. Name is George Briones. I started actually getting to the fitness realm when I actually got back from my last deployment in 2010 in Afghanistan, and luckily, I was put with a bunch of guys who obviously wanted to train super hard, and everyone that got into the realm of fitness in 2009 and that time period where, you know, CrossFit was the big thing, and that's kind of the idea where we all thought that's how we should train. As this combat or tactical athlete or just in general, in which it's not wrong, right? And that's one thing I'll say. I look at CrossFit and I still coach it to this day, now 9 years later. But I look at this aspect, you know, when I started doing it, it was more to stay fit for my job because we were doing patrols. I was carrying a ruck, you know, 70, 80 pounds to 100 pounds, jumping over canals, you name it. And, you know, I was really looking at that realm. Okay, cool. When I got back, it got me into the idea of being this instructor at the schoolhouse and really, really kind of opened my eyes to how to train the athlete and how to make sure that they have the best possibility of not just graduating the course, but also producing the durability and longevity of being this tactical special operations athlete when they leave the schoolhouse. Because I remember when I graduated the schoolhouse and when I got to my, you know, back to the units and doing all that good stuff, there was guys who came to us that weren't really in shape, or they just kind of went through the motions of selection and came back and stopped working out. And there's a lot of guys who do that. A lot of guys will go through a 12-week to, a year-long selection phase, and then all of a sudden now they're burnt out and done for the next year. right? And now it's kind of, well, what was the reason of going through all that and now being burnt out to actually do your job? And the goal there was to really kind of start understanding not just like the physical aspect, but also the mental aspect behind it. Because again, coming back from multiple deployments and coming back from deployment in Afghanistan, that was really, really kinetic. And those ideas, it really was like, how can I make these guys better? And it kind of led me into the idea while I was in charge of helping run PT in the pool. I was helping in charge of running the running and rucking and all that good stuff. And realistically, nothing against the other instructors, and I love them to death, but I was one of the main guys that kind of stayed in shape, that was kind of doing it because they were doing their own thing, and it's kind of just where it goes into it. So I kind of fell into the role of kind of being that guy who, one, made sure the athletes, or not even athletes, but the ropers were in top physical shape, not just physically, but mentally, and make sure that longevity was there. And that kind of really opened the door for me, dude, because I was able to kind of start getting into the idea like, okay, what do I want to do when I get out of the military, right? Like, I want to be this coach who, and not even just a coach, but I want to be this human being who's going to be able to help make that one person better no matter what. And that one person can go ahead now and tell everyone else, like, hey, this one thing helped me out, and I learned it from this one guy, and I think he's onto something, right? And that's kind of how I've always been since I've gotten into the realm of fitness. Is everything is research based, right? But at the same time, I developed this anecdotal experience that really puts me in a position to be like, all right, this is what works. Yes, research says and science says this, but this is what works for my body. And now it lets me know that all the other athletes that I'm working with or getting able to coach, that I got to come with an open mind to be able to understand that, hey, this is how we need to approach training. It's not just a one size fits all. And, being at the schoolhouse, an instructor, and doing all those things and being able to run students through MART that helped them get into the schoolhouse, and then being an instructor at the schoolhouse through patrolling phase and amphib phase and first phase and all these things really kind of let me believe that, okay, cool. Not every single athlete's different. I got to be exposed to that temperament of like every athlete or every roper is different, and how to learn how to work with every single one of them. And that's kind of really opened my mind to, as I am now as a coach, where it's like, yeah, I write programming for Soflete, and yes, we have group programming, but I really try and keep it to a very personal base. And guys now on Instagram and social media will reach out, and I'm very, very approachable to talk and ask questions about. And I've always told myself I want to be that person. And, when I was at the schoolhouse and kind of bringing it all forward to like where I'm at now, is like I've owned my own gym. I've helped run multiple gyms. I've helped other companies start their businesses from where they're at to where they're at today. I've been able to, be a part of a company that has just grown and changing the game as we look at in human performance for the general athlete to all the way to the tactical athlete. And one thing that we actually just came up with, and we talked about this just recently, was everybody's a combat athlete. If you're training for a 5K run, you're a combat athlete. You're training for, getting ready to go deployment or special operations, you're a combat athlete. Why? Because you have to manage everything across the board. Life, you have to manage professionalism. You have to finish, handle all these things to be able to achieve your goals. And a lot of people forget about that. Everyone thinks, oh, stress is just training stress. Well, realistically, no, stress is all kinds of stress. And luckily that I get to work and be around guys, especially yourself, where we understand what it's like to be at a high level of stress all the time, and how do we balance it to still live this life of of having a happy balance outside of the realm of our jobs, and being able to accomplish things that we do and still be the father, the husband, or whatever you want to be in that realm. And that's kind of where it led me to like really creating my foundation as an instructor at the schoolhouse, because it really shaped me to who I was as a coach when I left the military and when I left being an instructor to where I'm at today. And it's kind of one of those things I take on. I've been through multiple different internships, taken multiple different certifications. I've read a lot. I've done it all. I'm trying to get it all. I've been a full-time CrossFitter. I've been a full-time tactical athlete. I've been a full-time weightlifter. Now I'm a full-time ultra endurance athlete who's training for Tahoe 200. And it's kind of one of those things where how many coaches can sit here and say, or human beings say, that they've been across the spectrum on both ends. And there's not many, and I take pride in that, right? Because I understand that what it takes to be on both ends and how to balance it all. And I'm still learning it. Am I perfect at it? No. But when it comes back to like, who's this guy that you're interviewing? Well, yeah. This guy you're interviewing is someone who's very big on, not just learning by reading, but also learning by doing, and being able to put people in places where, it might not be super comfortable, but it's a very smart approach and a controlled chaos that's going to be able to help them reach their goals in a very smart approach in the long term. And I think a lot of people miss that mark when it comes down to trying to get there. And coaches do. And I don't mind. I don't have a problem calling out coaches who who think it's great to get people from one goal to another goal right away. When it's like, realistically, that's not like, it's not a realistic thing to do for people, because then you're just setting them up for failure long term, because now they think that, oh, to get something and it's going to be like that, a snap of the fingers, when realistically it's not, right? Life's one of those things, and life and training is one of those things that just continue moving on. And if you would have asked me that question, shit, 6-7 years ago, dude, it'd probably be like, oh no, I'm gung-ho about this. But now it's kind of like, you got to take this whole athlete mentality and kind of make it all. And that's what I've done for myself as an athlete and as a human being. And now as a coach, is I've been kind of really doing this for 9 years and be able to develop this idea of what it is to be this optimal human being. And I use the apex in the word, right? I'm trying to be this apex athlete who understands that he can balance everything in life. And sometimes one priority is going to go ahead and be much more higher than the other priority on the priority list, right? And my buddy Ryan Muncie says it the best. He's like, it's just moving the chains. Like, what is the goal when moving the chains for the next week or 2 weeks, right? That's going to be the goal, and then you just reset it. So my background, dude, like I said, is being an instructor, being an operations guy for a recon Marine for 8 years, being an instructor for 4 years, a couple of deployments, Afghanistan and Iraq, own my own gym. I've helped other gyms, with things and written programs for them. I write individually for athletes, and it's kind of one of those things where it's just really, really been fortunate to be under some really good mentors and coaches who really helped shape who I am and where I'm at today. And I'm still learning.
Yeah, man, it definitely sounds like you walk the walk. You know what I mean? And that's to me, as far as people that I look at to follow, and or to hire as coaches. Like if they're not walking the walk of the student as well, then I really don't have much patience or interest, for them. So the fact that you've done so many different things is awesome and super impressive. There's no end to your learning, is really kind of what I take from that.
Yeah. That's something that's huge, man. And I think Coach Bergner really instilled that. I mean, if anybody doesn't know who Coach Bergner is, Mike Bergner, he owns Mike's gym. He started the whole CrossFit weightlifting thing, and now he has Bergner Strength. And I've been really close, being able to be working.
Kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal.
Yeah, he's, and I worked really close with his son, Bo Bergner. Me and him are super close. I know his family really well. And one of those things that he told me, when I was making the transition out of the military into real life was like, you're always going to do something that you love. He's like, but also be a student to it. Like, you're always going to have to be a student to it. And even to this day with Coach Berner being at the place that he's at and what he's done, he'll still tell you he's still learning about everything and new things, because again, the fitness realm in life is always evolving. And once you become stagnant, we're fucking dead. Right. And that's kind of the idea behind it. So we got to keep evolving. And I've really taken that as a staple and like my foundation of who I am as a human being and as a coach.
Yeah. And I really think, like we've talked about this on the show before, but there's two directions you can go, right? You can go forward or you can go backwards. You're growing or you're literally dying, so how do you continue to grow being a new, different person every single day, and I think the best CrossFitters that I've seen are ones that have been in the space for, a decade or more. And you can see the different transitions within their growth, because you can only be, for most of us, right? You can only be a competitive, quote unquote, CrossFitter for a very short period of time. And then that ship is going to sail. And then what are you going to do? Because you can't keep doing the same old competitive CrossFit game over and over and over again. Are you going to apply it to jiu-jitsu? Are you going to apply it to endurance running? Are you going to apply it to, strength-based stuff? Like, what are you going to do to continue to advance your physical development inside of the CrossFit space? And the people that can do that really well do things like you're doing. And the people that don't end up not doing anything or going, or just crashing and burning and then having tons of failed experiences within the CrossFit space after their competitive, quote unquote, time is done.
Yeah. That's funny, man. When I own my own gym, because I used to own a gym called CrossFit Double Barrel out here in California. When I sold it, before I sold it, one thing I used to tell all my competitive athletes, when I had a bunch of individual athletes that were competitive in the realm of sport or fitness or anything else like that. And one thing I told them all the time, and you can ask every athlete that has been with me, now to this point, is like, my goal was to make sure that, yes, you're going to go ahead and stay competitive and be as competitive as possible in that space. But once you're done being competitive, how does it transfer over to your everyday living? For example, I had one athlete, Rachel Sterner, where I'm really close friends with, and I had her for 5 years. and we took second in SoCal in the Open and had a year where we're going to go and push for the games as an individual. We went team and made it to the games. But now the next year she started kind of like being competitive still, but now she's enjoying life. She's not broken. She enjoys life. She trains. She has fun. She has a kid. Like all these cool things you get to see, right? And I get to see this with a lot of athletes that I've been able to help and really shape that mindset. Is like, cool, you're a competitor now, but if I go and take this away from you in a year, what are you going to go ahead and do with this aspect of fitness? Are you going to you're going to get into paddleboarding and do triathlons? You're going to go ahead and become an ultra endurance runner. You're going to go climbing, or you're going to go ahead and learn how to utilize it to where you're doing jiu-jitsu, you're climbing, you're running, you're swimming, and you're doing CrossFit all in the same week. I think that right there is the golden standard, right? We should be able to swim, run, bike, climb, play, and learn how to have hand-to-hand combatives and stuff like that, and still be able to move functionally, right? Well, guess what? We have it in our hands. There's jiu-jitsu gyms, there's swimming, there's biking, there's running, there's CrossFit gyms. There's all that stuff out there to kind of look at that realm, right? And that's that whole athlete, that mindset that we kind of are now at. It's like, cool, you want to be competitive CrossFitter right now? That's fine. We can be competitive CrossFit for the next 2 years, and that's the priority. Cool. And I don't like to use the word sacrifice for CrossFitters, because when you go and decide to be in the gym for 4 hours a day and coach 24/7, that's not a sacrifice. That's a choice that you're making, you know? And again, that just comes from my experiences in the environments that I've been in, and how I look at the diversity in cultures, right? It's like, okay, cool. Like, you're not sacrificing anything. You're choosing to be there. That's your choice. Let's talk about guys. You want to talk about sacrifice? Let's go and look at guys that are putting themselves in danger every single day to keep us happy or keep us alive, and those kinds of things. So it does come down to a choice of being able to understand, like, hey, like, these are the goals and this is what I want to work towards. But if we pull them away from you, and now who are you going to be, you know?
Yeah. And that's even inside of competitive CrossFitters, I see that as being something that holds people back drastically, is that they don't have that idea of who they are prior to getting really good at CrossFit. I know that was my limiting experience, you know, for sure. When I went to regionals, I think I could have done exponentially better, and I did pretty good. Like, I finished 16th, but I think I could have finished, you know, top 10 if I would have been more confident with who I was and going into that. So without competitive CrossFit, I would have been a train wreck then, 100%. Like, that would have destroyed me. And you know, that definitely held me back. Just the fact that I wasn't aware enough to understand that.
Yeah. And we see that, and luckily we don't see that as much anymore. I think the whole space of like the fitness realm is now getting into like mental health, and hey, like, your purpose needs to be about you first. And it's one of those things where it's like, cool, guys, I'm glad that everyone's catching up finally. Like,
yeah.
This is something that a few people that I know that are really dear and close to me that we've been working on on our own since 2015, 2016. Mm-hmm. Like, it's like, hey guys, like, oh cool, like, you're finally understanding what the endocrine system is and how hormones actually react to the system. Because right now, those are the fads right now, right? Let's talk about that. Like, the fads are mental health and hormones. It's like, cool guys, like, I'm glad everyone's kind of coming up here, but that same thing goes, like, again, it doesn't go back to the root problem of, like you said it, who we are, right? Like, who are we really? Like, at the end of the day, it's like you competing at regionals, right? Like, when you look up into the stands, like, if there's no one there cheering for you, like, you have a fucking problem.
Yeah.
Right?
In the end, life is about relationships, and regardless of what your specific goals and targets are, like, if you don't have relationships with that, those people that like just sail by themselves, like, they put themselves on such an island that one, they're limiting their growth and their ability in their realm of what they're trying to do. But yeah, like, okay, congratulations, you just won the CrossFit Games, but you have no friends. Like, all right, now what? So what?
Yeah, and that wasn't a sacrifice. That was a choice that you made to sit in the gym for fucking however many hours a day and do all these things and eat a certain way and everything else. It wasn't a sacrifice. It's like, so, but that's kind of goes back to the idea of like who we are and like how we understand this idea of like validation and making this change and trying to become this whole athlete who's really trying to live life to the fullest. That's kind of the way I look at it now, you know?
Yeah, same way I do, man. That's awesome.
It's why we vibe.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so shifting gears, we've kind of like touched on the outsides of this, but like your experience in the military, mine with law enforcement, the term that I've really been trying to dig into lately is fit for duty, right? So what does that mean to you in terms of like fit for duty in life, and then fit for duty in terms of being a tactical athlete, you know, specifically in the military, but like your take on law enforcement, obviously, as well.
Yeah, and this actually, so I didn't get to mention this in my personal aspect, but I'm going to school right now for sports psychology, and I'm trying to get my bachelor's in science with that, and the goal is to kind of pair all that together with what I'm doing. And one of the biggest things that have stuck out to me is actually the very first thing that we should be looking at as when we're, again, these are my thoughts and how I look at this, again, is basic needs, right? But I think we miss this a lot of the times is everyone goes ahead and starts trying to work towards, hey, I need to go ahead and make sure that I'm fit for duty, which I need to be fit for the military. I need to be fit for LEO, or I need to make sure I'm fit for whatever race I'm coming up for, or whatever goal that we're working towards. And one thing that we miss most of the time is our basic needs for survival met? Is there safety and stability? Are we getting food and water and shelter? Because once we've kind of gotten that idea of basic needs, you know, together and in control, we now can go ahead and start moving up the pyramid. And the pyramid I like to utilize is going to be the Maslow hierarchy of needs. And if no one's ever looked at it or heard of it, that's a really good a triangle pyramid that you can look at and kind of builds you up to this self-actualization of who you really are and reaching this, and it's not a destination is the way I look at it, but reaching this journey that you're continuing working and trying to be fit for duty. So the first thing that I would, you know, if I was to build a pyramid and when I look at fit for duty, it's going to be basic needs, right? Like, are your basic needs met? You know, and what can fall underneath that can be, again, food, sleep, all those things. And then from there, move into, all right, cool. What is my support system in me working towards this? And I think a lot of people miss this, right? So my support system, right? Does my family support me working this hard to go ahead and work towards these goals that I want to go ahead and do? Am I balancing out that relationship and that support system to go ahead and make me not feel guilty? Because again, a lot of people will have that guilt there of like, man, I need to go train today, but I didn't get to hang out with my kid or with my family or with my loved one for however long. And I'm going to go put in a 2-hour training session. It's kind of like, well, now from there, you just missed one thing. And now you're trying to go ahead and make sure you're doing this. You're just adding a little bit more emotional stress onto the system than needed. Right. And that's something that's really big there. Now, getting out of the idea of like the psychological aspect needs that we kind of talking about there. Now I want to look at like more of like, well, what does it really take to be fit for duty, right? And the biggest thing I look at is going to be movement. And I've talked about this before with you is like, how well do we move? Because if you move like complete shit, guess what ends up happening? You end up causing probably more problems to the system than you need. If you can't squat properly and you're trying to bang out a 4x10 at 65% of your 1RM because you're trying to build hypertrophy and you shift to the right during your squat, over and over and over again, guess what happens? Like, you're going to end up causing a problem. Again, everyone thinks an injury happens from one movement. No, an injury happens due to the fact of 1,000 million times you move that incorrect way, and it just happens. So if we can't get our movement to a T or how we need to get us moving in the right direction, then we're going to have problems there, right? And then from there, that next portion of fit for need as a military or LEO is how well is your aerobic system? Because one thing that I'm learning in this idea of understanding how to handle stress is the heart is the main driver in how we manage everything in our daily lives, right? Like when we go ahead and what's the first thing we do? The doctors check when we go ahead and come out of our mother, make sure we're breathing, right? What's the last thing we do when we're not breathing, right? And the heart controls all that. So if I can't strengthen the heart in the aspect of building and delivering oxygen to the system, I end up seeing that I can't manage stress very well. And that's something that I've actually really, really noticed in the realm of kind of going into this whole idea of ultra endurance now, coming from a strength background, is I'm able to handle stress 100 times more than I was when I was just a pure anaerobic power athlete, if that makes sense. And a lot of CrossFitters see this too. They're so anaerobic that they have so much acidity and so sympathetic that when any kind of stressor happens in their life outside the gym, they fucking crumble.
Yeah,
and it's like, why are we training for? We're training to make sure that our life is balanced and we can handle these things outside of there, right? So again, basic needs, support system, movement is key, and then aerobic development, right? If we can't develop a strong aerobic base, you're not going to be able to handle anything else around that. And again, we can sit here and be like, well, maybe we put aerobic base first. Well, it's like, I'd rather get us moving and have that aerobic blended in together so we can do that. And then from there, we can start talking about strength training and start talking about gymnastics training and start talking about stressing the system in those ways that are going to go ahead and create those adaptations that you want to work towards. Cool, you're a SWAT guy and you want to go ahead and be able to kick a door down and be able to sprint a 40-yard dash sub 5.2 seconds, and you want to go ahead and back squat 350, and you want to deadlift 425, and you want to do all these things, that's great. But when it comes down to, well, how well do you do when you move those things, and what is a sport, and what are your needs for it? Because those things are great, but everything else below that, if they're not solidified and not have a strong foundation, it's just going to crumble and make things worse. Is one of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, even when you look at the strongest athletes on the planet at Westside Barbell, what do they spend a shitload of time doing? GPP, aerobic conditioning. And the reason they do that is because specifically your volume is limited by your aerobic capacity and your aerobic system, 100%. You will not recover fast enough to add more volume if your aerobic system is deconditioned. And as far as like movement based and aerobic system, like which is first, it's like, well, if you can't move, then odds are your aerobic system is so deconditioned that you're going to kind of hit both at the same time. You know,
exactly,
just by working movement, you will, by proxy, hit your aerobic system. You know what I mean? So which is first, which is second? I don't know, which is chicken or the egg. You know what I mean?
Like, it's one of those
there's
things
so much overlap.
You can blend them in together if you wanted to at the end of the day. And the idea that I take from this is, let's talk about doing a squat program, right? You're squatting 3 days a week, and you have to go ahead and do a 4x10 on Monday. You have to go ahead and do some kind of unilateral work on Wednesday that is focusing on just developing quad and those ideas there. And then going into another squat day on Friday. The more aerobic we are, the better we're going to be able to recover between those sessions to allow for optimal performance going into those strength days and those training days, right? And that's where people miss it, is idea of how like, and again, I'm not saying that that anybody needs to go out and go run an ultra marathon, or they need to go do a powerlifting meet or strongman competition. No, you just have to have this happy medium balance that's going to cater towards what your lifestyle is like. Right now, my lifestyle is like, I'm getting ready to train for a 200-mile race, so my priority is more endurance and strength's there, but it's not a huge priority. Now, compared to someone who's an LEO or a firefighter or a military athlete, or however you want to think about it, well, let's be real here. If you're a SWAT guy, how far are you really running most of the time? You know,
running, what's that?
Exactly, right? But you have to be able to move very quick with load on and be able to produce power repeatedly.
Yeah.
Right. And we go ahead and look at a firefighter, you know, the same thing with them, but they also got to be able to sit there in a zone 1 or zone 2 while fighting a fire for, again, multiple hours. And it depends on what their job is. Are they more of a hot shots type guy, or are they more of the city type guy? Because if they're more of the city type guy and they have to work through buildings, well, then guess what? They have to have the muscle endurance for the legs. It all comes down to that next portion of the pyramid that I look at. Okay, well, what does your sport and job require? And that's when we have to start becoming more specific so that you can handle it. So we're able to move forward and continue living this lifestyle of being able to perform your job at 100% and then come home. And I had this conversation with my buddy Rick the other day. We just did a podcast on it on the sideshow for him. And we talked about this, and it was like, at the end of the week, if your last workout at the end of the week is like making you feel like complete shit, or it just drained you and you have no effort to do anything else physically or mentally, then you did something wrong throughout the week to have you going into that, right? Because again, working out is supposed to make you feel what? Feel energized and make you feel good and make you feel like you're recovering. And yes, is there times to drop the hammer? 100%. But we don't need to drop the hammer 24/7, right? Because you
wait. You're saying you can overdo intensity? Is that?
Oh yeah, 100%. But it takes a toll on us, especially when we go and look at those individuals who working in these high stress demanding jobs. We talk about firefighting, SWAT, LEO, and military tactical athletes. When we look at that, it's like, man, you have to be able to have the mental energy and the physical energy to just go do and perform your job still after doing A, B, C, D in the gym. And that's one thing I'm really trying to push to like a lot of people. And I'm glad that you're letting me sit here and talk about this, of how I look at what does it mean being fit for duty, right? Or fit for your job is, well, your training sessions and your training programs need you to be able to give you the energy to go and still do your job to your best of your ability. Because guess what? People rely on you to keep them alive. The guy or woman to the left and right of you rely on you to keep them alive. And it's your due diligence to go ahead and keep yourself moving forward and keep yourself healthy so you can do that. And again, not taking nothing away from CrossFit, right? And it's more of like the coaches in the realm of how they look at it. And it's like, oh, let's just dose the combat athlete or this firefighter LEO with just fucking intensity and chaos. Where it's like, dude, don't you know that their job already is fucking intensity and chaos? How about you be that person who can control the chaos now and help them move in the right direction? And again, and that's just the missing link there that a lot of people don't understand is that, right? They live in a high intensity life. They live in a stressful job already. They're not coming to you to have more of that. They're coming to you how to balance it all out. So when it becomes even more stressful and more chaotic, they're able to handle it.
Yeah, it's 100% the misapplication of the intensity for that person. You know what I mean? So I can tell you with, telling of myself with this, when I was training at my highest level in CrossFit, I would go in and I would train for, I don't know, 2 hours in the morning. And then I'd go work second shift that started at 1400. And there was a day that I had to go home sick because my legs were cramping so badly on duty. And I was like, I went to check an alarm, and thank God it wasn't anything like major. It was just some bullshit alarm. But like my legs cramped up so bad, I could barely walk around the house. And I was like, okay, well, not only am I like, not following my nutritional protocols, obviously, to the point where my legs are cramping up so badly, but I can't perform my function for what I'm doing. So now the training that should be making me stronger for the job is now tearing me apart. And it was a total misapplication of CrossFit for one, and intensity for two. And like, that was a real eye opener for me. I was like, I got to change some shit here. This is not what this is designed to do. This is not what I'm supposed to be doing right now. I put myself at risk. I put everybody else at risk. And like I said, we check alarms 100 times a day, and 99% of the time they're nothing. But if that would have been that 1%,
That one time, yeah.
Yep, that's it. And it was literally me like pulling the lever and saying, what's it going to be today? You know what I mean? Like, I am not ready to perform my job. And it wasn't because I'm not fit or I wasn't fit. It was that I was going the other end of the spectrum and going too hard, doing something for fitness, quote unquote, that was not in line with my mission.
Yeah. And again, dude, we've all done that. We've all been there. I've gotten rhabdo for doing a gnarly CrossFit workout for upper body, and I had to run a ruck run the next week and had to do a bunch of stuff with students, and I literally couldn't do anything because, again, I decided to go ahead and push it because I put the priority of trying to be a competitive athlete over the aspect of what my job really was and what I had to do. And luckily, my job at that time period was to stay as fit as possible and work out, but I overdid it. And then it created this view of like, oh shit, like this is not smart, right? Like at the end of the day, when we're trying to make this tactical a combat athlete, or however you want to think about whatever you guys want to name it, because it's changed so much from military athlete, tactical athlete, combat athlete, it's come down to this. The goal is to make you as durable as possible and create the longevity of understanding that you are able to not only perform your job, but also to go ahead and perform your duties as a human being, i.e. a father, a husband, whatever it is, plus your training. You have to manage all of that. And if you're not doing that, we have problems and you need to check and figure out where it's broken.
And I would even go as far to say not just the snapshot, that short period of time within our lives that we're actually doing the job. Because what you're talking about are service-based professionals who are strapping guns to their hips and going in to deal with shit that society has said, I don't want to deal with this. Here's some money. You go deal with the drunk. You go put that guy in jail. You go get those guns off the street. And the reality is we're doing that for a fraction of our lives. But yet at the end of our careers, cops are dying on average 5 years after retirement. Like the average cop is dead within 5 years of retiring. And that's psychotic to me. So the fact that we need to build this durability and longevity, not just for the job, but for beyond it.
For life.
Because if you're military, law enforcement, fire guys, I guess, but we all deserve to live beyond our service. You know what I mean? Because our service is only going to be a short period of time. What are we going to do? We should have the luxury, if you want to consider it that, to see our kids grow up, to see our grandkids, to experience the end of our lives not cut short. And without that durability and longevity piece, we lose sight of it.
Yeah, and 100%. And it's even this too, man. It's funny. Is like I luckily this past year hasn't been really as crazy as happened, but I lost an athlete just recently to suicide. He was a military guy, and it was really weird, man. It was one of those things where he was following program, and we talked once a week, twice a week, make sure everything was good, and he seemed super fine and with it, no problems at all. And had to change his mindset in training and everything else like that, because he was all about going hard, and he adjusted to now, hey, like this is goal to balance your lifestyle, because I know you want to do A, B, C, and D. And I don't know where he ended up taking his life. We still don't know why or what happened, but it kind of led me to this idea where it's like, you're right, dude. It's like no matter what we're doing in the job or outside of the job, there's always going to be that psychological adversity that we have to deal with for the rest of our lives because of that short time period that we worked of doing that, right? And unfortunately, no one's going to help us out but ourselves. Well, guess what? There's multiple people on this planet that have been there and lived it and doing it and able to put information like we are now. It's like, well, okay, cool. What is fit for duty? And I look at it like this is like, well, that fit for duty can also go ahead and be me fit for life, right?
Yeah.
Just because you're fit for duty now, when you're done with your job, those things still apply. Things still apply, right? Instead of your job specific on the top of that triangle, now it changes to maybe whatever goal specific you're working towards. Like, oh, you want to do a powerlifting meet? Like, again, we are always utilizing, chasing some kind of purpose in the realm of like what we're doing in as an LEO or a SWAT guy, right? We're trying to take those guys off the street that have guns, drugs, or whatever else, or the military. You're going and fighting for our country against terrorists, or LEO, or I'm talking about firefighters fighting fires and wildfires and all these crazy things. But that still does something to us psychologically, and the way we combat it and the way we go ahead and work towards something is we continue working for a new purpose, no matter what it is. And we continue working and continue taking that step. And one thing I like to say is like, you're always climbing the mountain. That's pretty much what we're doing. Like, again, we go back to the beginning of the show is like, if you stop climbing the mountain, you're dead, right? You're not like, imagine this, right? Imagine like not just being fit for duty, but fit for life. You're on this mountain, you have to climb 5 miles over 4K invert. That's a long time of climbing. It's fucking 40 degrees out. You have certain warming layers on. And if you stop, you're going to go ahead and freeze to death. So you got to keep moving no matter how slow or how fast it is. And understand there's going to be times when we're climbing that mountain and how cold it is and when you want to quit as many times, you got to keep moving forward no matter how slow it really is. Because I guarantee you're going to find that pep in your step 4 or 5 steps down the road, or even 20 steps down the road, or even a mile down the road, and continue picking it back up. And that's kind of the same idea I look at with when we're transitioning out of these ideas like you're talking about, these short time periods where guys are either taking their lives or they're just having heart attacks afterwards. And that's because of the fact that we're missing something on this term. And again, will this change down the road? Yes. But again, my main idea when I look at this is like, how well do we handle stress? And the way we develop that is by developing an aerobic system that is going to be able to handle that stress. Again, does that mean you can't squat all the weights you want and deadlift all the weights you want, snatch, clean and jerk, and do all the CrossFit workouts you want? No. But understand that needs to be just a small portion of your life because you have to fit everything else in there. And yes, does it feel good to open up and get your heart rate at 170 beats per minute because you had a rough day at work? Yes, it feels amazing. It feels good to let that pain out. I've been there, I've done it. But at the same time, it also feels good to go ahead and go out for a run at like a hunt and keeping your heart rate low and just enjoying what's going on around you, because that right there is when we actually start making a change to the psychological effect that we're talking about long-term and creating that durability, than just creating that long-term durability and longevity in the realm of the fitness aspect. Now we're talking about the mental health aspect there. And that's what's been huge in my growth as a coach and a human being, is really understanding that, like, even if I was to stop running ultras as I am, I would still continue running. Right, I'll still continue running and still getting out for the long days, because you know what, those things do something for me, not just physically but psychologically, dude. And that's something that a lot of people are missing. Everyone's like, oh, go for a run. It's like, hey guys, you don't have to run the whole fucking 30 minutes. You can walk, you can run. Yeah. Oh, you want to jump on a bike, you can do this. You want to swim, you want to do this, cool. How about you do a CrossFit workout and you don't want to go ahead and spike your heart rate? Cool, do Fran 21-15-9 and try and do it as slow as possible.
Yeah, only breathe through your nose. I tell that to people all the time. If you can keep the restrictor on and just breathe through your nose, you're probably going to tap your aerobic system more than your anaerobic system.
Well, and that's another thing too, man. That's where I've kind of changed in the idea of looking at the nasal breathing thing. Is like, nasal breathing is a skill that must be taught and not thrown at an athlete right away. And what can happen is, and I've seen this with athletes, because I've had athletes, when I got into the whole nasal breathing thing also, I didn't really understand it as well. And again, like all coaches, we all do it, right? We see something new fad come out, and then all of a sudden we start trying, and then some people don't dig into it. And I'm one of those guys that digs into it. And I started noticing that there are limiters, and that is a governor for certain athletes. But some athletes, it actually causes the opposite effect of what we're looking for, due to the fact that they never got taught how to breathe correctly, or they're way too anaerobic. So now we're just creating this sympathetic response and this buildup of CO2 in the system, because again, the goal is to get as much oxygen or CO2 out as possible and get more oxygen in. their body doesn't know how to translate that or have that exchange, well, then we end up seeing a problem there, right? So yes, the goal would be like, hey, go ahead and do Fran 21-15-9 nasal breathing. At the same time, if you feel like opening your mouth to breathe, that's fine, get oxygen, but you should be able to move at a pace that when you get done, you should be like, I could have done that for an hour if I wanted to. Right?
Gotcha.
Like,
Yeah.
that's an aerobic effort right there.
Yep.
That is, but you're still practicing your sport. And that's the problem. When we talk about evolution of athletes, you know, we look at Matt Frazier and stuff, and I've heard Matt Frazier talk about this. There's days he'll go in and do a 20-minute AMRAP with just the barbell and some whatever else and just move slowly through it. Why? Because now we're working how to move properly, right? We're working that movement variability, and movement, if no one doesn't know what movement variability is pretty much a repetition one after another. And when your heart rate spikes to a certain level, we end up seeing the breakdown in movement. So if we can go ahead and teach the athlete to have very good movement variability when their heart rate's at 90% effort of doing thrusters or wall balls or whatever else, then boom. If I can teach them to go slow and have good movement going slow, it's going to transition into them going fast, right? And that's one thing I say, you have to go slow before you can go fast now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where, like since I had my hip surgery, I've done a shitload of tempo work. And I haven't done tempo work since I was like, I don't know, learned to lift weights back when I was like 13 years old, you know, and it has been so much fun, if nothing else, you know, to just work time under tension, but in a different way, you know, and it you know, it's doing a lot for me as far as limiting the load on the bar, but still making me really strong, you know? So, just thinking about things differently. So you can still do the same thing.
Yeah.
It's, again, how do you need to apply it to your situation? And that's, you know, I was talking to a client I had a while back, and we were talking about programming. He was one of the, like, I would say, like, old school CrossFit mentality of like, oh, this program is the best, that program sucks, like my program is really good. Is very, very opinionated with that. And I remember being that guy. And really, to me, a program's a program. You know what I mean? It's how you use it as a tool for what it is. Yeah. And it's all about the application of it, because they all have, you know, good points and bad points, and like whatever. It doesn't, like, the program to me is not as important as how you use it.
That's huge, man. And that's another thing. And again, we all come from that mentality. Like, this program's better than this program. And I work for a company who writes programming for multiple different athletes on different levels, right? And we have competitors. And I'll say this too: go try other stuff out, because you know what? Our way might not be the way for you, and that's okay. But if I was able to teach you something, some small portion that you go and do another program, and you're like, oh, I took this from Soflete and I'm doing it, now I'm doing this. Oh, and then I came back because I didn't enjoy what they were doing. We've had that before, where guys have gone and tried other things, come back. Like, oh, I went to go try this for a couple of weeks, or I went to go try this for a program, or I went to go try this for a year. Now I'm back here, and it's like, cool, man, that's great. Welcome back. You know, and this is the things that are changing now. But 100% right, dude. It's like, the person's going to have to find what's going to work for them at the end of the day. And it comes down to like, hey, you just got to go in there and, like, again, does that mean someone in your gym who's a SWAT guy comes into your gym and trains today, and you know that they just came off of a long, let's say, just hostage situation, and they want to train? Great, let them train. But like, hey, but you know what? We're going to put everything down to 60% today. And you can move, you can jump on the bike, you can do the CrossFit workout, but I need you to keep your effort super low. I promise it'll help you out in the long term. Instead of you coming in here and dropping the hammer some more, you're just digging yourself a hole even more. Let's go ahead and refill that cup that you lost. Let's refill that cup that you lost of the whatever you had in that cup. Let's refill it instead of taking it down even more. And I think that's the mark that a lot of people miss.
Yeah. Well, and I think, you know, is like, you know, type A personalities, typically, if you're talking like, you know, your background with your military stuff, and then, you know, being a SWAT guy, like that's, oh, go hard. It's like type A, drive, you know, and we just get so ingrained with that. It gets hard for people to see the other side of the coin, you know, and to experience that as well. So,
and you can be a type A personality and still do these things. I'm a type A personality. Like, I just understand, I'm more aware of it. I've just created and learned how to use the emotional intelligence in the right realm instead of being shut off. And yes, it's taken some time, it has, but you know what? Once you start understanding it, you're like, man, I can live in this spectrum, and then I can also live in this spectrum. It's really cool to bounce back and forth. It's really shitty when you're stuck in one spectrum and can't go anywhere.
Right. Yeah. And it's easy for us to say, based on like getting outside of our 30s, or deep into our 30s, like, man, if I could have understood this as a 20-year-old, like, holy shit. Like, I just hope like one 20-year-old hears this and was like, oh, maybe I should change some things and see what happens,
Yeah. Well, it's kind of one of those things too, man. Remember when we were 21-year-olds and 22-year-olds in the fitness room, we were looking at guys that were 30 doing this also. And now we're in that position, right? We went from being mentees to mentors now. Now our mentors that were, when we were mentees, are now masters and are just, I look at like this apprenticeship aspect, right? Now we're the mentors of what we've learned. And we are now the what is it? The prophets of putting out this information to people, It's kind of how I look at it.
I like it.
Oh man.
Well, cool, man. I got some Instagram questions for you.
Sick.
So let's just kind of like rapid fire, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with this. But all right, so here's number one: is what is different about the needs of the tactical athlete versus the general population? And this doesn't have to be like a super in-depth, just kind of like bullet point your way through it.
That's actually a really good question, man. It's actually a question that I've actually been trying to really pinpoint it because, again, the way I look at the needs for a tactical athlete and the needs for a GPP type person or just your general fitness enthusiast is the fact that, one, their stress is completely different, right? Their risk for stress is completely different. The tactical athlete's stress is going to be really high. The general enthusiast stress is probably going to be low depending on what their job is. So the differences in there is going to come down to their job specific or their sport specific and what their goals are working towards. One thing I can say that they are going to be different as a whole is going to come down to the idea of now, well, how well is your aerobic system? How well is your strengths and how well is your movement and how well are all these things to cater towards your job or towards your lifestyle goal, right? Again, like I said, I don't know how in depth you want me to get with that. People are looking for more of like a exercise selection or idea. It's one of those things where it's kind of hard to say because a tactical athlete is such a broad word. And at the end of the day, when I go ahead and put those two together, I look at them as the same, right? We're trying to build this whole athlete who can handle stress outside the gym, utilize stress, and build the resiliency and the tolerance inside the gym to stress. And then whatever they're learning in the gym and how to get stronger and do that, they can apply it to their everyday life. Let's go and take a soccer mom, for example. And I hate using that term, but sorry. But go ahead and take the soccer mom, for example, who just comes to the gym and just wants to work out and just wants to look good naked and wants to be fit. But at the same time, though, she also wants to go ahead and pick her kids up and take them here and there. And she wants to go out and run around and kick the soccer ball with their kids and do all those things. And now we go and look at the tactical athlete who has to do a job a certain way, but also wants to go and be that soccer dad or whatever else and go and kick the ball around. There's nothing really different between those two, right? Like we're all training for different reasons because our sport. One's training for their job specifically, but at the same time needs a manager training for their life. One's training for life, right? But if you go ahead and put that, there's the key word and there's life. They're both training for life. And the difference in that is just their job and what their goal is and how do you manage it and how do we manage stress and tolerate stress to go ahead and give us the optimal performance to do what our real purpose is at the end of the day.
Yeah. So finding what your mission is and then further defining it from
there.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Finding what the mission is, right? Because again, everyone's mission is going to be different. And I think that's a huge part that a lot of people are missing is like, well, what's the true mission right now? And there's a mission for everything, right? So
yeah. Yeah, 100%. All right, so this might be like a yes or no. So in terms of law enforcement environment, what would you define as fit or strong? So sort of like the last one, like I guess I'm gonna like simplify that a little bit and say, do you have any like specific markers that you're looking for? Like are barbells most important? Are sandbags most important? Like what do you think what do you consider to be like standard for metrics for law enforcement?
I like this question, man, because this goes into the idea of just tactical athlete, and it's not going to be a long-winded one, but unconventional strength is something that a lot of tactical and LEO athletes miss. Unconventional strength. So if that comes into strongman type implements, sandbag implements, great. Because you know what? When we go ahead and use a barbell, we only move in one direction most of the time. And if we don't start throwing dumbbells in our hands, kettlebells, strongman implements, stones, and all the other good stuff, when we start putting that into our program, we start getting put into these unnormal, unconventional type positions that we actually need in the idea of a tactical athlete, right? So the biggest thing I think there that would help a tactical athlete or, in the general of what is strong or what's not is being able to have that unconventional strength that most don't have. Because if you can have that, you're golden.
Love it. Yeah, 100% agree. All right, last one, supplements. Best supplements. That was it. Best
What's
supplements.
funny? No, what's funny is I got this question asked on my Instagram story. I did a Q&A today and kind of still going with it. And it's funny, man. It's like I've really had to find what supplements work for me. And believe me, dude, I've tried all kinds of supplements, from being a weightlifter to being a fucking CrossFitter to being a tactical athlete. And it's really come back down to, like, I use supplements, and I only use supplements either in after I've like. So the supplements is a word that I like to. Is the way I look at it, is it's a supplement for a reason, right? It's only supplementing something that I'm lacking or I'm deficient in. And the goal is to try and not be deficient in anything across the board. But can supplements aid in recovery and aid in performance? Fuck yeah, it can. So the supplements I use is going to be the Soflete Whey Protein. I use the Soflete Endure, which is my endurance drink. I use their non-stim pre-workout, which is not the Octane, it's the other one. And I use that more for endurance stuff. And then their Teddy Bear Night Night is something that we push all the time because it does have melatonin in it. I don't like using it because melatonin fucks with me when I sleep, and it gives me really bad, fucked up, vivid dreams, and I can't handle it. I blame melatonin for that. Or not melatonin, I blame the Meffican pill. You know what I'm talking about, Meffican Mondays on appointments. I take that. And then when it comes down to recovery, I utilize Ucana. So Ucana is a CBD company. It's a veteran owned also. And if you guys ain't following them, check them out. Ucana. They have a CBD isolate, which is 0 THC. And they have a full spectrum, which is 0.003 in there. And that can be a whole nother rabbit. And then I actually am just getting teamed up with X Endurance to start being one of their athletes. And in that realm down, it should be happening in the next month. But I utilize their Extreme Endurance, which is a lactic acid buffer for just in general, which is really good. And I've been using it since 2012. I used it during the Recon Challenge when I was in. I use it when I was training students. Use it as the CrossFitter weightlifter. Now you even use it now. Those are the supplements that I do use. When we go and talk about creatine and other things, are they good and they need it? Yes. Do you need to put it in all the time? No. You can get it from food. So I'm really one of those kind of guys that's gone from taking all these kinds of supplements when I first started to kind of now where I'm kind of pick and choose what I need in my system, and everything else comes from real food.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, I think that about wraps it up. Where can people get a hold of you at? Where can they find more about you? And where you at?
Sick. They can find me. We'll just go email first. They can find me at george.briones. The third. So it would just be like the 3 little I's, whatever you want, at gmail.com. Or at george@soflete.com. And they can find me on Instagram at coach_GB3. They can find me at Facebook, also just George Christopher Briones. You can find me there. If you guys have any questions, don't be afraid to reach out, email, or DM me. I'm usually that easy to get a hold of.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks so much, dude. I can't thank you enough. I appreciate your time. And we'll have to do it again for sure.
Hey, thanks, man, for having me on the show. I appreciate it a lot.
No problem.